Imagine you were going to take a trip. The first thing you have to do, of course, is decide on a destination. It wouldn't make much sense to begin planning your route, much less what to stop and see along the way, if you don't know where you are going to begin with. The same principle applies to course design. It's important to have a roadmap that leads you to where you want to end up before you begin the journey. In the same way, it's important that we know what it is that we want our students to accomplish in our courses before we begin arbitrarily creating content or tests. This is where curriculum mapping comes in. A curriculum map is essentially a roadmap for a course in which the destination is your course objectives. Everything in the map is meant to get students to those objectives. That means that everything that goes into your curriculum map, your content, readings, fun videos and activities, what have you, must support students reaching those objectives. Likewise, your assessment should measure how far students have progressed towards reaching those goals. When all of the learning, activities, and assessments included in your curriculum map work together to accomplish your course objectives, we call that alignment. This video will walk you through how to put together an aligned curriculum map that will build the foundation for a focused, goal-directed online course. I will show you the provided curriculum map template and explain step by step how to fill in the document so that your course objectives, module objectives, learning activities, and assessments all align with one another. So let's take a closer look at the curriculum mapping template. The first step to filling this out is fairly easy. Just identify the name of your course. Then, under Course Assessments, make a list of the assessments that you plan to include in the course, such as tests, quizzes, discussions, or projects. Keep in mind that alignment often is not a linear process, though. This list may change as you start to fill out your objectives in your curriculum map and need to adjust your assessments accordingly to match your objectives. So just think of this as a draft outline. If you are starting from scratch, I find it to be easiest to skip the next section on course assessments until you have developed your course and module objectives, as the types, and certainly the number of assessments you use, may change based on how your modules develop. You can see I included a detailed list of assessments here, but I only developed this list after several drafts and changes to my overall curriculum map. The next section of the template asks you to list your course level objectives as a numbered list. These are the big overarching goals that you will set for your students in your class, so this should be somewhat broad in scope. Ask yourself, what do you want your students to be able to do after they take your course? What skills or knowledge do you expect them to take with them into other courses or their careers that will stay with them long after they leave Nashville State? It may help to think broadly about what kinds of knowledge or skills are most valued in your discipline and why you think it is important that students take courses on your subject. While you are writing your course level objectives, you may want to refer back to the Module 2 resources on writing course objectives that correspond to the appropriate level of Bloom's taxonomy. Additionally, your objectives should follow the SMART method. That is, they should be specific, measurable through assessments, achievable for your students, and relevant to your course. For example, in a history course, a course level objective might be that students should be able to write a historical research paper with a clear argument and effective use of primary and secondary source evidence to support it. This objective is specific. It's not vague at all. It paints a clear picture of what tasks students will be able to perform at the end of the class. It's measurable. An instructor can easily observe whether a clear argument and effective use of evidence is present in a research paper. And finally, it is challenging, but with the proper supports, it is entirely achievable and relevant for a history class in which students will frequently be asked to analyze and form their own interpretations based on historical sources. The other 8 example course objectives I have listed here are also specific, measurable, achievable, and relevant to the discipline of history, which this course is for. There is no particular number of course objectives that you must have, so long as you are able to align each course objective to at least one module level objective, which we will list below. Most courses have between 6 and 10 course objectives, but you should certainly have at least 4 and not more than 12 or 13. At this point, you may also be saying, but the course objectives for this course were determined by my department, or even by a testing or licensing body. In that case, you won't have to write your own course objectives from scratch. Just put the departmental objectives for this course in this space. However, it's still a useful exercise to consider these objectives carefully because your smaller, more specific module objectives, which you will write, must be designed with your course objectives or your big goals for the class in mind. Next, in the table below, you will start to divide your course into modules based on the major topics you want to cover in your class. Many instructors just take their textbooks chapters and use them as their module topics. And while the major chapters of a textbook can help provide a useful structure or outline as you draft your class, I would discourage you from doing this too strictly. Often, I find that textbooks contain far more content that could possibly be covered adequately in a semester. For instance, the history textbook that this course was designed around is incredibly dense and includes a lot of content on topics that I do not consider crucial to my teaching objectives. So I plan to skip some chapters and only assign short selections of others to avoid cognitively overloading students with unnecessary content. I also modified my module topics accordingly to reflect my own priorities as an instructor and to better highlight my own areas of expertise. I encourage you to also use your own discretion as an expert in your discipline when deciding what topics in your subject are most important to cover. These will define what your module topics are. After you have listed all of your module topics, it's time to begin developing module objectives. Module objectives are different from your course objectives and more limited in scope, but they should derive from and support your course level objectives. Unlike module objectives, which are, again, more limited in scope, course level objectives are bigger and more ambitious. They're not something that students can accomplish overnight. Students will not be able to write a historical research paper in a week, nor will they be able to identify all of the major developments in history before 1600. They will have to gradually build towards these objectives by acquiring specific skills and knowledge along the way that will help them towards achieving your broad overall course level objectives for the class. In an introductory history course, for example, students may need to first gain some basic factual knowledge about history and practice analyzing and contextualizing individual primary and secondary sources on a small scale before they can be expected to produce an original research paper. Plus, introductory students will require many examples modeling the norms of research in the discipline, not to mention instruction in the basics of identifying a research topic, locating and citing sources, and organizing their thoughts into writing. All of the skills and knowledge that I just listed that are associated with developing a research paper are more appropriate and achievable in smaller chunks of time than our course level objective, the writing and delivery of a big, high-stakes research paper. Each of these goals could probably be achieved in a week, a module, or a unit of the course specifically dedicated to that topic. When you start to consider your module objectives, I'd encourage you to also think about the smaller component knowledge and skills students will need to acquire to meet each of your course objectives. For instance, many of the objectives in our example Module 1 touch on the rudimentary skills necessary to achieve many course level objectives, including the most advanced, writing a research paper. The objectives for this module are: distinguish between primary and secondary sources, identify a primary source from a library database, define historical context, and analyze the context of a primary source. All of these are individually rather simple, but they are the component skills of historical research that students will gradually build on and practice through the semester until they are ready to complete their final research paper. Your module objectives should also refer to and anticipate actual assessments you will be grading within the same module, or very shortly thereafter. An example of this is if you have a discussion topic planned for Module 1, you will likely have an objective that states, discuss, followed by the topic with appropriate context. In all cases, the verb you use, write, analyze, identify, discuss, etc., should closely match the action that students will perform in your assessments. In our example from Module 5 of this course, you can see that our module objectives often use the same language as the assessments in the right-hand column. When you write your objectives for each module in the course, you will indicate this alignment by matching each module objective with a course objective. It is helpful to number both your module objectives and your course objectives using acronyms. For instance, it is common practice to label module objectives MO and their number, and course objectives CO and their number. Next to each module objective in your curriculum map, indicate which number course objective, or CO, it corresponds to in parentheses. I have used this format in this example. Now, remember how I said that your objectives all need to be measurable? That means you as an instructor need to be able to measure or get evidence for whether or not students have met your objectives. We measure achievement of objectives through assessments. So all of your assessments, your quizzes, your tests, your discussion activities, your essays and projects, all of these tasks need to be designed to measure students' achievement of your objectives, and vice versa. All objectives must be assessed in some way. Otherwise, you have no way of knowing if students have actually accomplished the objective. For example, if a module objective was compare and contrast the ancient Greek civilizations of Athens and Sparta, you would need to design an assessment in which students must compare and contrast different aspects of these two societies, for instance, in a discussion post. Multiple choice or true-false quizzes are a great way to test students' ability to identify items or concepts at a very basic level. For example, if your module objective was identify the basic tenets of Islam and the major events that led to its emergence in the Arabian Peninsula and its spread throughout the world, this knowledge can probably be assessed through a quiz alone. It is not possible, however, to test students' ability to discuss, apply, demonstrate, or describe anything with a quiz unless you include written responses or short answers. To test students' ability to apply the factual knowledge and concepts they acquire in your course, seeing as application as a more advanced skill, you may have a reflective discussion post in that module. In our example, the instructor might have a discussion assignment where students are asked to discuss the causes for the rise and spread of Islam, which would require them to draw their own interpretations from the information they have. The other assessments for this history course are also drawn directly from the module objectives. Many of them are intended to gradually build up students' analytical and research abilities to the point that they are able to complete a final research paper. Several module objectives ask students to practice developing an argument and defending it with primary source evidence and discussion posts in preparation for the more advanced work of analyzing multiple primary sources at once in a research paper. Others are more specifically tailored around individual parts of the research process. A Module 3 objective is select a historical research topic and develop a research question. And the corresponding assessment for that module requires students to submit their chosen topic and their research question for approval. In Module 8, the objective is identify relevant library resources for a research paper, and students are tasked with turning in a reflection on a required library consultation and later an annotated bibliography. In Module 11, the objective is craft a historical argument and detailed outline for a research paper, and this is exactly what students will turn in. In Module 14, after they have turned in their first draft, the objective is to integrate instructor feedback into written work as students compose their second draft, and so on until students have produced a polished piece that fulfills the course level objective. This, of course, is just one possible approach to module objective assessment alignment. I chose to have one major written assignment in this class broken into many smaller parts and designed many of my more conceptual or methodological module objectives around those parts. Other courses may have, say, 3 papers due in a semester, each one addressing a different topic or challenging students to apply a different skill. How you choose to break up your assessments is up to you, so long as your assessments actually align with the module objectives they go with. Now that you have determined your module objectives and aligned them with your assessments, only now will you start to think about what learning materials and activities you will need to provide your students so that they can succeed in these assessments and meet your objectives. You will fill these out in the middle column of the template. For example, if one of your objectives was correctly cite sources using Chicago style, you will at the very least need to provide students with some instruction and examples before asking them to actually perform this task in your assessment. In this case, I've asked students to complete the NSCC Chicago style LibGuide tutorials, then practice citing a journal article in their discussion post. Just as your assessments had to align with your module objectives and your module objectives had to align with your course objectives, the same principle applies to your learning materials. Make sure that your learning materials align with your assessments. In other words, make sure that you choose only those learning materials that will enable students to succeed on your assessments and achieve your objectives. Creating a complete, detailed curriculum map can be a challenging and time-consuming process. However, the results will be immensely rewarding. By planning from the beginning with your objectives in mind, you can be sure that the course you develop will be organized and focused. Plus, once the curriculum map is finalized, all of the basic components of your class will already be in place, and you will have a solid outline to guide you as you begin to actually build your course materials. If you have any questions or need assistance with the curriculum mapping process, please do not hesitate to reach out to your instructional designer.